Hello, this is Dr. Tirrell, and in this tutorial we're going to go over using Blogger, the online blog service for podcasting. Blogger is owned by Google, so we already have Google accounts and we should be able to get access to Blogger. We're going to go over modifying Blogger templates and sites and layouts in order to customize it to be appropriate to your topic and your aesthetic taste. And then also how to then use it to host and distribute podcasts. Won't actually host the files themselves, but it'll be providing the RSS feed and the embedded player. So let's go ahead and get started. This is our home page. The first place we want to check is probably our project page, right? So we can go to assignments and then podcast project. I just wanted to take a quick check here so that we can see what we're actually going to be doing, right? We know that once we generate our podcast, which is an MP3 file, right, an audio file, we then also have to create the corresponding website to host these episodes. The files won't actually be on those websites, but that is where people will get access to them. We know that we have to, on the website, embed an audio player for each episode. We're just making one episode, so that'll be easy, but it's the same process, no matter how many episodes you could conceivably create for your podcast. And we need a functional RSS feed to syndicate the podcast. Now, we've already done reading about what a podcast is and how it works, right? One of our sources was explicitly about the technologies behind podcasts and the history. So we know that an RSS feed is necessary. So these are two separate things, right? An embedded player that's actually on the website itself. I mean, that's how sometimes people access audio. But then a functional RSS feed that actually syndicates the podcast, right? It actually serves the audio files so people can subscribe to them through some form of podcast player. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. There's a link to Blogger right here in the information itself. I also have a link further down here in the resources as well. So if we click on that, it'll take you to your dashboard. Once you're logged in, you may have to log in separately. I'm already in. You can see I've already got a couple of blogs here. Portcast, which is a previous podcast that a 314 section did. I've got a test here that I made up previously. But we'll go ahead and start from scratch. So obviously what we want to do is just create a new blog, right? And so there's a button right here for new blog. And we'll go ahead and click that. That's going to ask for a title. You probably want something descriptive that's associated with your subject, right? Maybe the title of your podcast or whatever. And you can, put spaces in here like, my fun podcast or whatever. You do need to give it an address, however, and you'll notice that all the words are going to be run together in your address there. And that just has to be unique, and it'll check and make sure that whatever you select is available. I bet you my fun podcast is not. Let's check. Oh, that is available. That's crazy. I am not going to use that because I don't want to steal it from everyone. I'm actually just going to use just a test thing. So we'll call it sp16 this semester. ENG 314, we'll call it test 2 since I already have a test 1. That's got to be available. Yep, it's available. And then we can select a template down here. You can change this at any time. It just wants you to pick one, but you can always change it, so don't worry too much about it. I'm going to use something just kind of basic and open about Awesome Incorporated. And then we'll click Create Blog, and that's pretty much it. This thing about Google domains, Google will sell you a domain. A domain is the actual thing that goes in the address bar, right? So like I have my own jtirrell.com. The thing before .com is the URL you purchase, and that's true for everything. Facebook, that's a URL, and that's a domain name. ESPN, whatever. Those are things you actually do have to purchase. Now we don't have to do it for this because if we just stick with the subdomain, which means, it's just part of Blogger, it's, sp16 English 314 test2.blogspot.com, and then you don't have to pay anything. And we don't want to pay anything because this is just a class project. But it is something to keep in mind if you want to develop this further. If you get into podcasting, you can purchase an actual domain name directly through Google, but we're not going to do that now. So here we are. We haven't really posted anything. We're here on the overview. You can see these options over here. We can go ahead and get a new post. We can actually, if we click view blog, we can take a look at it. Here we are. It's pretty spared down or sparse right now. We've got my fun podcast. There's no posts. There's the home. There's a subscription link, which we'll take a look at in a bit. It's got the about me here. And, if you want to see what this looks like to other people, you can sign out, or you can do something like in Safari or Google or Firefox or really any of them. You can create a private window or an incognito window that essentially, it doesn't carry over your login or whatever, so you can see it as everyone else would see it. I'm going to do that right now. Now, this is what everyone else sees. Pretty much the same thing, although I have those little editing icons here, of course. Another thing to point out is it's got this weird bar at the top. You might not even notice this just because we tend to visually edit things out now. But it does have this weird header up here at the top. It says, next blog. I mean, how does it possibly arrange those, right? I think it's actually alphabetical, if you can believe that. The Stefan Psych Ward. Yikes. Transplanted in Switzerland. These are all fascinating in their own way, I'm sure. But let's get back to our fun podcast. So what this is, it's a little header that Blogger inserts on their own podcast. You can't actually remove this, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But here we can see what it looks like to everyone else. All right, so here we are. I'm going to go back here to this dashboard, it's called. There's a lot of information here, but we don't need a whole lot of it. We don't have any page views yet, so no one's visited our blog. That's hardly surprising since I just made it. Over here on the left, however, we get a lot of interesting things, right? You can create new posts, which we're going to be doing. It gives you an overview of the posts you've made. We haven't done any of those yet. All the pages you have, we haven't created any new pages. We've just got that home page. But we will actually create a separate page just to go over that process, just an about page, a separate link on our fun podcast that will take folks to an about to give them information. You can moderate comments, by default, and you can change this however you'd like. You can add comments to these posts, visitors can, and you can moderate those here. There's Google Plus integration if you want to do that. There are statistics here, and you can see there's sub-posts about what posts get more hits and all that. Earnings, if you're going to use Google AdSense, you can monetize this. Campaigns is how to expand your audience. A lot of this stuff you don't need. You can. The good news is you can just poke around in this stuff and kind of take a look at it. What's good about bloggers, it's just sort of an entry-level blogging platform. We can use it for podcasting. You can't really break anything, I mean, you can poke around, you can do this and that, but just about everything's fixable because you're not going to be tinkering around with any real back-end code or anything like that. So this is what my fun podcast looks like right now. You can see it's kind of gray and bland, and that's kind of why I picked it. So how do we actually change things? How do we make it our own, right? So there are a lot of things down here to do that. Settings is one place where you can provide, you can actually change the title, right? So this is my super fun podcast. What are we talking about here? And I left this open in another window so I can actually check this as we go, right? We can add a description. So this is a description of, in this case, my podcast. It's about blah, blah, blah. Now this is just, a description for the site itself, the podcast itself. It doesn't pertain to any specific episodes. So we've saved that. Let's see what happens. Does it actually change anything? Oh yeah, see? It adds it right underneath. It said the max was 500 words. You can see why, because you wouldn't want a whole lot there. But you can see how this kind of functions as a subtitle. Privacy, this is if you want it open to search engines and other people. We do. A lot of this we can just sort of leave the defaults, right? But that shows us where we can make some textual changes. These other settings here, we're going to return to these later, but you can see some of these like posts and comments, right? You can change who can comment, right? Depending on if you want anyone to do it, which, you'll probably get some spam if you do that. A registered person, anybody with a Google account. Up here with posts, you can change the post template you're using, although we won't get into that. How many posts on the main page do you want to show? You can do it by posts or by days. 7 is a weird number. I'm going to change that to 10 and save it, although we're only going to do 1, so it's not going to matter much. There are other settings over here you really don't have to change, but they are here, and they're all very user-friendly and kind of self-explanatory. Email, language, and formatting, right? We're dealing with English, and we can set our time zone and that kind of thing so that our posts are, when it posts, it has a timestamp. We are going to deal with the other here in a little bit. We're not going to get into it right now, but there is one setting here we're going to have to change in order to make this workable for podcasts. Right now, it's great for a blog, right? A textual blog, but you have to change one little setting in order to make it work for podcasts, or nothing's going to happen. So the other things we want to look at now, and this is how to actually modify the Blogger visual layout itself. We've got 2 over here with layout and template. Let me just kind of give you an overview of how these look. This is what the layout is, and it kind of gives you these different regions of your blog and ways to kind of modify it, right? So you can see we've got the nav bar up top, and that's this little thing that I just pointed out. Underneath that, we've got the header, which says, my super fun podcast. So that's this thing. Cross column means if you want to insert anything that runs all the way across the page, you have sort of 2 options for that, this one and then this one. You got the main section right here, and then you can see we've got a sidebar right over here. And this just pertains to the current layout. We can change this quite a bit. One thing I'd like to do is, as I mentioned, it by default puts this weird little Blogger sort of header up here. It calls it a nav bar. I don't really like that. I think it just clutters it up, and it lets you know it's a Blogger page. It makes it look a little generic. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that just by clicking edit. And you can see I can change what it looks like, or I can just shut the thing off. Right? I'm going to do that. So I'll save here, and I'm going to click Save Arrangement. Now if I refresh this, watch what happens. Boom, right? It's gone. I can bring it back anytime if I'd like, but I prefer it gone because it's a nice clean look. Let's see, there are some other arrangement things we could do here. Got the attribution gadget here at the bottom. If you want to add your copyright, you could do that. Although, as we know from our IP discussions, you don't have to. Anything you produce, you automatically own the copyright for. So, copyright 2016, Now we can take a look once we save the arrangement at how that looks down here. So you can see it. So we'll return to this in a little bit, but it gives us sort of an overview of how this functions. If you can kind of think of this as a mock-up of the page itself. We got a couple of footers down here. We've got a sidebar and a main area, and then a couple of header things. So that's kind of how that works. We can also do things like in the header, we can add an image file here by uploading it, right? I'm not going to do that, but you can. You can also change the placement of the elements as well. I encourage you to do that, to experiment, because we're not going to delve into this, but really it's up to you to experiment with this stuff and utilize it. The more you customize this for your uses, the better it's going to be, and probably the better grade you're going to get. Let's briefly take a look at this template section over here. You remember we picked this first one sort of for the just the default, but we can switch to a different one. There's some simple ones, some dynamic ones, some watermark, ethereal, whatever. There's all kinds of different ones, and then there are even some classic templates if you want to experiment with those. That's an older version of Blogger. It just makes them look different, actually. So here's, a reverse contrast one. That's kind of a neat look. I might try that. You can just cycle through them with these area keys as well. I actually kind of like that. I mean, it's just really parsed. I mean, it really stripped down. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Kind of like that, actually. That's what I might actually use, but just for the sake of, fun, let's swap some other ones so I can show you sort of how this works. This is a nice beachy, almost UNCW kind of theme here, right? Okay, so you can swap in templates, and then you can actually click Customize to make fine-grained changes to those as well. And again, I really encourage you to do this. It helps make your site look just more like you and less generic, right? If it looks generic, the audience is going to be a little bit turned off by that because it looks generic. It looks like you haven't really put any effort into this. You just slapped it up there. There is an Edit HTML button, but unless you're comfortable actually dealing with HTML directly, which we haven't gotten into this semester yet. We will near the end, but not all that much. This can just look like, Greek to you. However, this Customize button, this gives you a really easy visual way to do this, right? So here's our current thing. Look at all these options we've got over here, right? Background, it gives us some suggested themes, although we can change our color scheme however we'd like. We could put in this one or this one, and then we can, make manual changes right up here, right? It's giving us some suggestions, but maybe I don't want their suggestions. Maybe I want to experiment on my own. And as it says, you can go to the Advanced tab to customize colors for specific elements. What that means is, notice that everything is kind of changing in a theme whenever I do this. If I want to change things separately, like if I wanted this header to be, green and the rest to be red, I can do that under Advanced, right? It lets you deal with things in a very kind of individual way. Page text, blog title. So let me show you if I change that to just like a crazy green or something, right, like that. So you can do that. Looks weird, but you can do it. There are situations where you'd want to do it. I don't really like it right now, but you see what I'm saying. You can see you can actually even change the templates up here. Yeah, okay. Right, to look like something with this. It's got this nice kind of navigation system up here. So we can experiment a lot with that. We can change the width, and what that means is, as you can see, when I slide this, it'll sort of make it wider or narrower on the page itself. The default is here at 960. That's pretty good. We can change the width of this sidebar, right? We can make it kind of tight over here or really wide. I'm going to go back to the defaults, but you see how that works. Now the layout here, we can actually change. This is different from that previous layout one in that this gives us options in how the thing should actually be assembled, right? You can see up here we've got different footer layouts. I'm just going to go to a single one here, right? Cleans it up a bit. And you can see this structure where we've got, you can kind of see up here. Let me make my arrow. There we go. It gives us all these sort of sub sidebars and this over here. I'm not going to deal with all that. I want the simplest one you got, right? So I like this one with just this one sidebar over here. Although I might move it over to the left just for fun. So that way they'll be over here. And what you can put in this sidebar, there's really lots of options. This is just sort of how the page is structured, right? You can just do this straight up, as it shows up here, no sidebar option. You can put one in there, you can put two, you can put sub ones, however you want to handle it. There's lots of stuff you can do. And as it says, you can go back to where we were before if you click back to Blogger and then go to the layout option to change all these little gadgets, they call them. They're different things that provide functionality. Okay, so as I say, I mean, I'm not going to just pour over this. I want you guys, and we're going to have, let's see, time in class on Thursday the 7th here. to just really get into this, but I want you guys to experiment and really make this stuff your own. You can't really break anything. And even if you do, it's always fixable, you know? So think about what's going to work for you, and then you can always change it, you know? You don't have to have this all planned out to begin with. All right, so let's see, where are we? That looks fine. I'm going to change the color scheme just because that's a little, it's a little played. There we go. Everybody loves blue. Ooh, how about, yeah, let's make this UNCWE. Gonna apply that, and then I'm gonna go back to this dashboard here. And there we go. Honestly, I would tweak this because it's weird. So that's essentially how that works. When we go back to the layout thing here now, we can actually make some changes. Does it give us different options for the fave icon? The fave icon, that's this little thing up here. You see how there's this blogger symbol? Let me make my arrow larger. You can change that to a custom one. You just have to upload a tiny image. I think they're 64, maybe 32 by 32 pixels. I'd have to check. But let's look at some of these other things. Right now, gadgets, I mentioned. There's lots of stuff you can add to your site to give it functionality, right? Featured post, your profile is already up there by default, but you can remove that. A blog archive, so if you have, as we do on the Portcast, let me just go back to the main dashboard, and if I open up the Portcast, which you remember is from an older 314 section, let me show you what that looks like. See how we've got this sort of historical breakdown of posts over here, 2011, you know, in 2013, because we used it a couple of different years. You can add something like that if you want. There's all kinds of other gadgets you can add here as well. You know, embedded images. We'll look at separate pages here in a second. Lists of links of other podcasts. I mean, that's something you can really add to yours, is what other podcasts do you know, kind of like or associate with. So that's an option there as well. There's just text, you know, you can put in YouTube clips and everything. There's all kinds of fun options. There's options to style your feed and that kind of stuff. Again, I encourage you to experiment with this. We're going to just kind of bare bones it, but there is lots of functionality here. One thing I am going to add while I'm here is I'm going to add this pages thing, as it says display a list of standalone pages on your blog. I am going to add that just with the plus. And sure, I'll go ahead and call it pages. What links do we want to add? We've got home right now, and that's all there is. So we'll save this. I'm going to save this and take a quick look. Okay, so see, now we've got this list of pages. It's over here on the left. I actually want this to be up here so it looks more like tabs. All I have to do is actually just click and drag it up there. Right? This is the pages gadget. I'm going to move it up here into cross column and then save that. Now let's take a look. This should have popped up here. Boom. Now you see we're starting to get tabs. Now I've only got the one page. So let's go ahead and add another page where we can make it an about page to say a little bit more about ourselves or the podcast or whatever. You don't have to do this. It's not required by the assignment. But you know, if it's something that would make sense for your project, it's pretty easy to do. I just went to pages up here, and I'm going to add a new page. So it gives me this option to compose it in a what you see, what you get format. I can also click HTML. If you're familiar with HTML tags, you can do that. We're actually going to do that a little bit when we do a post, but for right now, it's fine just to compose, right? I'm going to type just some rich text here, and you can make it bold with what you see, what you get. You know, underline, you can add links, right? What if I put a link here to, you know, whatever, www.google. Link. Yeah, gee, Google still exists. Awesome. All right, so you can add a link. I'm going to go ahead and publish. Okay, so now I've got two pages. I've got this home page and then the other page. Now watch what happens if I refresh here. Okay, it didn't add that new page. Let's actually go figure out why that is. I'm going to go back to the layout, and I'm going to check here on my my gadget, my page gadget. Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. Pages, sorry. And you can see why not. It's because I actually have to select the pages I want to display there, right? It had home by default. I'm going to add this one as well. And we can change the order. I want the home one furthest to the left, so that's fine. Yeah, I want it as tabs, so that's great. Okay, now let's take a look. Oh, let me save, and now let's take a look. There it is. Now, I foolishly didn't give it a good name, so let me go back and change that. Easy to do. Go to Pages, and let's edit this. Let's give it a page title. Let's call it About. Okay. And there we go. So now we've got an About page. It looks like that. And you can see this sidebar stays. And you got a home page. Let's take a look at what this looks like to other people again. So private window. So there's our home. There's our About, right? And I can post a comment, right? Because I have comments turned on. You can shut those off. So that's the gist of what we've got here. That's pretty much all we're going to go into in terms of customizing in this tutorial, because I don't want this to go on forever. These are long enough. But again, we are going to have a workshop in class. We're going to spend basically the whole time just poking around with this, customizing it. Feel free to experiment, to do all kinds of different stuff. A good resource is to look at other pages of stuff you enjoy, right? Like if you enjoy the, I don't know, Mystery Show is a good podcast. Mystery Show podcast. So what if I checked out their page? And, yeah, see, I could get some inspiration from this. I kind of like this clean look. So how are they doing theirs? You know, here they've kind of got a similar setup with a main and then some gadgets over here, right, with subscription links. So, you know, poke around, look at shows you like, things you're interested in, you know, and you can get some strategies from that. And then you want to think realistically about what's good for your audience, what works visually. You can, of course, upload images here to the header, the background you saw on the portcast. In fact, let me pull that up again. We've got a shot of the doc that's just repeating there in the background. One of the students took a picture of that. You can see the font has been changed to look a little more casual. We have an About text gadget over here. We've got the episodes gadget over there. We've got attribution because the portcast jingle actually uses a Creative Commons audio. And remember, we always want to attribute. That's why it gives us that information when we go to download. So here it's giving attribution for that song, right? It uses Art Now. And then we've got some subscription links there. Okie doke. So that's the gist of that. We're back here on our dashboard. So let's go ahead and take a look at our assignment again, because we know we're going to have to start dealing with the podcast itself. So how do we do that? As I mentioned, there's one thing we have to change here in our settings in order to get podcasts to essentially work. Because if I try a new post right now, you know, I can type stuff, new post. Wow. Post. But, you know, how do I add the audio? You know, there's a video thing here, but, you know, I don't know if that's going to do it. It's really just YouTube links. How do I make this a podcast? You really can't right now. I'm going to back out of this because it's not set up quite for it yet. So I'm going to go to settings. And I'm going to go down here to other. And there's one setting we have to change. And it's right here. I'm going to make my mouse larger. Ooh, there it goes. Of course, it did it as I moved away. So it's this enable title links and enclosure links. And if you click on the help here, it actually tells you enclosure links are used to make podcasts, MP3s, and other content in your post playable in feeds like RSS and Atom. So that's exactly what this is for. What's happening is it allows us to enclose audio files. If you remember from our reading about how podcasts get distributed, they use RSS, and all that happens is there's a special link in there that points to an audio file, in our case, an MP3 file. By default, Blogger doesn't have those turned on. So we just need to change this to yes. And now, boom, we are podcasting. We are good to go. Now, if I go back to new post, and I'm just going to compose, and I'm going to actually start, talking about my episodes. So, the first episode covers the best, dog parks in Wilmington and okay. So here I can write a description, and when I'm ready to actually attach the audio, it now added this option over here for links, and I can add enclosure links, and that's how we're going to add the audio file to our RSS feed, and that's going to make it a podcast. That's all we have to do. So I'm going to walk through that right now. Here in our podcast project page, it actually gives us the information about how to do that. And remember how I said it was going to be super important for you to name your files correctly for this project? It's because I'm going to give you a link, basically. Oops, Jessica just turned something in. Thank you, Jessica. And that link isn't going to change, right? So you can upload a file, and then as long as the name is correct, everything's going to hook up. So before we do that, before we actually add this enclosure link, I kind of want to walk us through how this works. So right now I'm actually going to publish this. Okay. This one I'm going to delete because that was phony baloney. Okay, so let's take a look at our podcast here. So here, we do have our first post. This is just text right now, okay? There's no audio added to it. There's no enclosure link, nothing. We know that our website, we need to have two things. We've got to have an embedded audio player for each episode and the functional RSS feed. Let's go ahead and start with the embeddable audio player because I think it makes a little more sense, and then we can build the RSS feed after that. So I provided code here under resources for the audio player, okay? Everything we need is actually right here, but let me show you how this works because it can be a little confusing if you've never done it before, but don't worry, we're gonna all do this in the workshop. I'm gonna edit this, and I'm gonna move from this compose thing to HTML, okay? So now this is actually HTML code. You can't really tell because nothing's different, but let's see what happens if I make this word bold and this word italic, and then we'll switch over to HTML. Do you see how it's added these HTML tags in here? It does that automatically. That's for bold, and that's for italic. So now how do I actually add an audio file? Well, here's the code. We really just need to copy this and paste it and then make a couple of changes, okay? So I'm going to copy this from our project page. It's here on podcast project and then embedded audio player code, right? So let's copy that, paste it here. You have to be in HTML. If you do it here, it's not going to work. It's actually just going to, it's going to post that as text. So it's not doing anything. We've got to go over to HTML here. Now we post it, okay? And you can see how it's a tag just like these things are tags. Now, right now, let me sort of show you what's going on here. It's embedding audio, right? It says audio. It says controls because it's giving us, when we take a look at it, play and pause and forward and back controls. And then it's pointing to this particular source. What's going to happen is when you guys turn in your podcast to me, you're actually just going to upload them to drop it to me. And I'm going to put them in a particular folder. So all of this is going to be exactly the same for everybody, this first part. The only thing we have to change is our last name and our first name. And then we leave the rest of this the same, right? That's all we have to do. So I'm going to leave this right now and just sort of show you how what happens because it's not going to work correctly. But it's not going to like explode. And then this thing here, your browser will not support the audio element. That's if someone's browser is old and it can't embed audio this way, it doesn't just leave a blank. It tells them your browser can't do this. So I'm going to update this. And let's take a look here. Boom. We've got an embedded audio player, but if I click play, it's not going to play anything because remember, this link, this isn't pointing to anything, right? Because it says last name, first name. There is nothing called last name, first name podcast. So that was a mistake, but let me just go ahead and change it, right? So my last name is Tirrell. My first name is Jeremy. That's all I have to do. Now I'm going to update. And I'll refresh this. Lo and behold, when I click play, it plays a sound. You may not be able to hear that. Yeah. That was just a test file I used. But you can see it's got controls here. You can actually set the volume. You can jump back 30 seconds. That was just a test beep, so it can't go back 30 seconds. But do you see how that worked? All you have to do is put your name, your last name, and your first name. And as long as your file is named correctly, this is going to be pointing directly to your podcast. What's actually happening is I'm going to store all of your MP3 files on my Dropbox account, and then you just point to them using this link. If that's confusing, we can talk about it in class, but the gist of it is you can't really upload an audio file directly to Blogger. It can't really do anything with it. So we have to find somewhere on the internet to put our MP3s. We're just going to be using my public Dropbox just because that's an easy thing. Okay, really the only thing you need to remember is you copy the embed code over from our project page, okay? And then you just switch your last name and first name where it says, and we'll check and make sure everything works. I'm not going to leave anybody out on an island and just tell you to figure it out. We'll make sure all the pipes are hooked up. But now you can see what we've got, right? We've got a description of our first episode. It's automatically gives us the post date. We've actually got audio controls here, so we can play the audio. I've got headphones on, so you guys probably can't hear that. So at least right now, we've got the first part. We've got the embedded audio player, right? But we still don't have a functional RSS feed that is going to include the audio. Let me kind of show you what that looks like. So over here in my iTunes, I subscribe to a lot of podcasts, as you can see. Actually, this isn't a lot, but whatever. I want to show you sort of what happens if you try and subscribe to this thing, because right now it's not really going to work. I'm going to just copy this link that says subscribe to posts. If you click on it, let's look what happens. It's asking me, do I want to add this to my shared links? I don't. No, I don't want to do that either. See, because what it's doing is it's trying to read this this text file. Sometimes if you click on this on a different browser, it'll just come up as a bunch of what looks like gibberish. It's because it's specialized text. I'm going to go ahead and copy this link, and I'm going to try to subscribe to this in iTunes. Okay. And you can see it did subscribe, right? My super fun podcast, but there are no episodes, right? Where's the audio? Now, the reason why that didn't work is because we haven't actually built the RSS feed to include that enclosure link. Okay, so I'm going to unsubscribe from this and then delete it just so things don't get crazy. We have to add that enclosure link over here, right, to make the RSS feed functional. So people could come and listen to this on the website right now, but they can't subscribe. This isn't a podcast yet. It's just audio on the internet, right? So let's go ahead and do that. All you have to do is on your post here, just go ahead and click this links option here. We don't need to title it at this juncture because we're not adding anything. Okay, so what do I put here, right? If you click the help, it'll tell you MP3s, other content to associate, right? So what link do I actually put here? Well, it's actually part of this code. It's just this whole thing that goes from HTTPS all the way over to the MP3. It's just everything inside of these quotation marks. That's the link, okay? And then the MIME type. Now, did you see how when I clicked in it, it automatically put audio MPEG? Most of the time, if you put in an MP3 link, Blogger is smart enough to read that and it knows the correct type. So just about always, whenever you do that, it'll automatically fill this in with audio MPEG, and then you don't have to touch it. It's only a little squirrely if it doesn't put anything in here, then you have to write audio MPEG yourself. If it doesn't pop up automatically, though, check your link because it's very possible you're not pointing to the right place. Because Blogger's good enough that it knows what an MP3 file is and it puts the right thing in here. Okay, so that's all I have to do. I'm going to click Done. And now I do have an enclosure added. Okay, I'm going to update this. And I'll refresh. And you can see there's no change, really. It's like, well, hey, what happened to the link, right? And it's actually there. It's included in the code of the RSS feed itself. So when I copy this link now and I go to subscribe in iTunes, watch what happens this time. Okay, so I can subscribe with the link here, subscribe to podcast. There it is. Okay, and you can see what's happened now, right? It's actually subscribed to my podcast. We've got an episode here. I can play it. Although it's just that horrible test beep. You can see it's got the title, My Super Fun Podcast. I've got episode 1 there. So this is a functional podcast just as much as any of these others, right? 99% invisible. There's the unplayed in the feed. WTF's feed, whatever. Ours works exactly the same, right? So we're ready to go with our podcast. If you actually look at the project page here, we've done what we need to do, right? We've customized our website here. Now we'd obviously do that more because this was just test stuff. We've got a embedded audio player for each episode, the one that we've created, and a functional RSS feed to syndicate the podcast, right? So we've got the player here. We've got the functional podcast feed, right? We can even jazz things up a little bit more. What if I wanted to, for example, include a download link? I could actually go back to Compose and download file or whatever. A link to the MP3, right? That same URL that we've been using before. Okay, let me update that. Now we've got this download file link. It points directly to the MP3. That's so if people wanted to download it for offline use, they could do that as well. But that's the gist of what we've got. I know this was a lot of information, but this is all stuff that each one of you can do, right? That's why we're going step by step. That's why we're doing drafts. That's why we're doing tutorials and checks. This is all stuff you can do. And the way to get into it is just to start to experiment, right? Create your site and then start playing with layouts and templates, adding pages, figuring out all the different things you can do. We're going to meet in class on the 7th, and we're going to have a workshop then. So start tinkering and then come in with questions, because if you've got a question, then someone else in the class does as well. We're going to spend most of the time just doing hands-on stuff. This is all stuff you guys can do. I'm really excited to hear what you come up with. And during the workshop, if you run into some problems or whatever, I'll be there to address them. There's really nothing, that can't be solved. And then, of course, you can always poke around online for advice and ask your classmates as well. So that's the gist of what we've got. I look forward to seeing you guys in class. Come with questions. Come ready to work. I will see you guys then. Bye.